Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Deborah Jenkins of Amplifying Voices, and the voice that I'm amplifying tonight is none other than the Reverend Dr. Donald Odom. He is the pastor of the Great Glover Memorial Baptist Church in the city of Brooklyn, New York. He is a colleague, he is a friend, and he exemplifies Black history, in my opinion, in terms of the past, present, and future. He and I both occupy space in the past. And right now, we're talking about the present and how we see the future. And so I want you all, along with me, to welcome Reverend Dr. Donald Odom. Welcome, Pastor. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Oh my, it's my pleasure. And when I say it's my pleasure, you've watched me for like almost 2 years now do my other show, but this one is different because this one is streaming across Sable Network TV, and it will have a longer shelf life than what we have done over the last almost 2 years via Facebook. And so anybody who comes and subscribes to Sable will be able to see your video because we're going to keep it for at least a year until next Black History Month. And so, welcome and thank you so much for agreeing to be one of the men in Black history, past, present, and future, that I'm able to highlight and focus on so that the entire community can benefit from your expertise, your gifts, and even your faith. So, without delaying, let me ask you this first question that I've shared with Dr. Odom earlier. So we met at New York Theological Seminary through our mutual friend, Dr. Courtney Wiley Harris. And we're both fairly active in social media and have an affinity for justice. How does your biblical understanding align, or rather, how does your justice position align with your biblical perspective?
I began to look at the Bible, of course, after or through seminary in a different way, and to be able to understand more that what is right is to treat the people right.
Hmm.
I believe Dr. Hendricks put it best is treat the people's needs as holy
Mm-hmm.
in the politics of Jesus. And so I look at that and say, okay, what is going on in my community? What is going on in the nation that I cannot ignore, that I must speak on in any platform that I'm given? And in the recent sermon, I made note that the word justice appears about 28 times in the Old Testament. And then if we look at the New Testament in Matthew 5 in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, blessed are the meek. That is a source of justice, restoring to the people what they should have. Because at the end of the day, if we're all made in the image of God, then why do we have such a disparity?
Mm.
The disparity, it bothers me. The disparity says we're not the same. And it's not just about color, it's about the poverty, it's about the mental um, anguish that people go through. It's about the invisible people
Mm-hmm.
who may be living on the streets. They've been pushed so far outside of the margins. So to me, again, the Old Testament speaks of it many times. Jeremiah 29, seek the welfare of the city,
Mm-hmm.
and in that you will find your peace. So we're implored to look at what's going on around us, not ignore it.
Right.
And by us looking to it, speaking to it, assisting those in need, then our needs can be met.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it is not for me to criticize the actions of others, but I can't really imagine progressing without doing what you just said, seeking to bring justice to others, and in so doing, receiving some for myself, because I can't sleep well. You see me, I'm very vitriolic sometimes in social media, you know it, but you're very patient with me. That's for the other people who don't know.
Mhm.
But it really pains me to see the struggles of people, and then to feel that there are so many who really don't mind that suffering and can walk past it or just blindly ignore it. It bothers me. So I'm so happy that you're sharing from what you've also recently shared at your church about that and how you feel. So just to expand on what you said, we have new issues. I mean, for the last 2 years, we've been plagued with a lot of violence against black bodies and Latin and black and brown, as the people say, bodies. Now we're in our city, and I'm not certain that the pandemic didn't have a lot to do with, or doesn't have a lot to do with, the response of the community, some in the community, towards the police. um, Even that is something that I believe has to be addressed, even from those like myself who are just always out there seeking reform and better treatment from law enforcement for people like us, black bodies. Can justice also be sought for law enforcement, even as they advance against us? Now, Pastor, I'm throwing that one in, just to see your opinion on that.
Yes, I believe that if we are true to what we should be, which is teaching one another, showing each other the examples, then why would the police be exempt from learning how to better communicate with the Black and Brown community? Why are they, why would they be exempt from having empathy?
Right.
That the training that they receive should have a component there that allows them to see people as people.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it's okay to uphold the law, but when you're upholding the law against someone who doesn't have the wherewithal to totally comply, if someone is stealing a piece of bread,
Mm-hmm.
where's the compassion that says, I get it. This is a problem for this person.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to work with that individual to correct the behavior, yes. But then again, understand that we don't have all the answers. And simply wearing the badge and the gun does not give you the right to usurp humanity.
Right. Right.
Humanity cannot be left behind, even when you're doing what you think is right to uphold the law.
Right. And you make such a good point, because I remember stories. I didn't experience it, but stories, and I've heard it so many times, of how officers may have been called to a corner store, a supermarket, from someone taking a loaf of bread. And that loaf of bread was to feed themselves and their family. But instead of arresting that person, there was a time when officers would actually escort, perhaps, or give them a referral to an area pantry or something like that. Would really go into their tool belt and not always come out with a gun or the pad to write a summons, but actually intervening, doing that service piece that they have become known for, protecting and serving. Serving means also connecting those who are desperate and in need to community services. They are a part of the community, and therefore should go into, think outside of the box. But it really, a lot of it has to do with how they're trained. What emphasis is placed on making that ticket and making arrest versus taking that service piece to a different level by connecting perpetrators, and not giving them a collar, and I don't know. It's a very, I don't think it's that complicated, but the way law enforcement is today, it seems like it's something that they can't even imagine to do.
I think too, losing the investment of the cop who walks the beat. You have no real way of knowing who's who.
Right.
You have no real way of understanding the situations that go on. Because if we drive by something, it's very different than us walking down the street and getting a real feel for what has happened. I live
Right.
2 blocks from a precinct,
Mm-hmm.
and I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen officers in the corner store purchasing something.
Really.
So the lack of real community involvement, the lack of real community investment by these folks who are not, okay, you're not from this community, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But those 8 to 12 hours that you're in the community, why aren't you making that investment? But if they take you off the street and don't allow you to walk that beat, don't allow you to see who your neighbors are, then you have less empathy for them. Let's
Oh,
put it that way.
right. There's no real investment other than your paycheck. Really, that's really
Right.
what it boils down to. And so when two officers are murdered by a member of the community, that's when my antenna goes up in a different way. And that's why I've been very quiet 2022. I've been very introspective so that I can tamp it down, the vitriolics, but also to see how I can be more effective. And Pastor, I think the community is just in pain. There's so much pain. And this lockdown, the pandemic rather, that included a lockdown, us not being able to socialize, I think it unleashed a level of hatred, evil, whatever you want to call it, from within our community to the point where a young man who's not even 50 is willing to take the lives of two officers, and if he had been successful in not being struck down himself, perhaps a third, and his mother and his brother, possibly. And I don't know if anyone is thinking about it in those broader ways, to say that there's more we can do within the community. We have a new mayor, and that's, again, I'm going off of our prepared questions, but we have a new mayor who continuously is asking the community to partner with him, to help get the city back on track. Can you very briefly share with me your feelings about what Mayor Adams is asking of the community as a whole? You as a community leader and pastor, but just as a member of a resident of New York City.
Well, I think at one point, the invitation is to come back in to be a part of the conversation. There are times when elected officials can lose their way and lose the constituency that they're supposed to have as a part of them. And if that is the case, then you're making decisions without understanding who the folks are,
Right.
who are the players. And in Mayor Adams' situation, I think it's the right move, because we can bring a problem, but can we bring a solution? Can we offer a solution? Because in my work life, my manager would say, okay, if you bring me a problem, try bringing me a solution as well.
Right. Right.
Not just bring me the problem,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but give me an idea of how I can fix it. And again, from leadership, that's what has to happen.
Yes.
You have to include all of the stakeholders
Yeah.
and allow them the opportunity to voice their opinions. At the end of the day, some things will go over, some things will not, but being heard makes everyone feel a lot better about what has happened and how it can be eliminated or eradicated.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's a really good move on his part. Um, let's see how it turns out. I think it's very early, and he literally came into crisis with the murder rates, the officer being shot. So our city is basically on fire, and he came into a firestorm, and he's got a lot of large fires to try to put out. And the fact that he's requesting the community's support and help, I think it means a lot. It means a lot. Let's transition into our next question, which is um, because this is Black History Month and the Sable Network TV is trying to be very intentional in highlighting the contributions of Black men, past, present, and future. You're one of those men, as you have a temperament that can draw young people, in my opinion, into a discussion. How do you balance your more traditional positions with what seems to be a disregard for some of those traditions by our youth today?
As in my work life, I ran a youth program for the state of New York for 16 years.
Wow. I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And so in that, my first group of students, let's say in 1986, was very different than my last group of students in, let's say, early 2000s. A different type of teenager, different issues, teen alcoholism,
Hmm.
um, failing grades, those kinds of things that said, okay, how do we address this? How do we bridge a gap? Because those first teenagers that I dealt with had what I would consider simpler issues.
Hmm.
But then when I'm talking about teenage alcoholism, or I'm talking about someone who may have experienced date rape, it's a different, there's a different approach. There's a different way of looking at that group of people and saying, okay, how do I reach them? And I simply start conversations. I've learned to allow these conversations to be organic.
Good.
Let's talk about what you want to talk about.
Hmm.
When you say you don't want to talk, we don't talk. We just, okay, we'll wait. And let's see if out of that we build the trust to be able to say, I'm comfortable with this now.
Wow.
You know, sometimes you got to go back and look at where you've come from.
Hmm.
I grew up in Bed-Stuy
Okay.
all my life. So I've seen a few things. I've experienced a few things. Statistically, I'm not supposed to be here because, you know, men my age were involved in the drug scene and the gang scene.
Hmm.
They Vietnam,
Sure.
they
Sure.
weren't supposed to be here.
Hmm.
And so when you've survived all that, I have perspective and I can say, listen, I get some of the things you're talking about, but when I can't, I'm asking you, how do I help you?
Wow.
How do I help you? You say, I don't understand. Well, help me understand.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
as you help me understand, let's see if we can reason together.
Yeah.
So
That's
that's the way I approach it. And like I said, I'm looking for an organic response so that there's no put on, there's no false face. Okay, let's deal.
yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important. And audience, I had no idea that that was the pastor's secular work. I just knew your temperament, what I see. And you've even tried that on me. Well, let's see if we can work it another way because they don't know. They don't know, right? Maybe Courtney knows and maybe Sam knows, but most of them don't know what I'm talking about because we are getting new viewers here. But that is so wonderful because so often young people believe and feel and are often correct in that belief and feeling that we don't have ears to hear them come in a very different way, a very different way. And it's not so much that they hate tradition. I think if they strike out at tradition, it is because we have not invited them into the tradition. We've pushed it on them. And so for you to say that you listen, you don't talk if not necessary, and you are ready to re-enter or begin a conversation when they are, I think that speaks volumes, which leads me to our next question and our final formal question. um, so much has transpired in these last almost 2 years, or is it 3 years? I'm losing track.
It feels like that.
It does. It really does. As a leader in the community, what do you project or believe will be the future of our Black community in terms of economic and social justice?
I think what has to happen is, again, the dialogue that comes from what do you need?
Mm,
We have a we have a food pantry, we have a soup kitchen.
mm-hmm,
Um, Thanksgiving, we gave out meals. We invited people to come in who wanted to eat in and just talk them up. How you doing? How's it going? Just so that no, come on, you don't have to come to the church. I just want to know how you're doing.
mm-hmm,
And so again, those conversations have to be had. We were able to do something with Reebok recently where they used our parking lot and our fellowship hall. They were shooting a commercial about a block or two away, and they needed a station. So we were able to work together to allow them to use that. And again, they hired a couple of people from the community, a couple of the young teenagers to do some work. So again, it's about saying, okay, we're not just here on Sunday morning, but we're here whenever you need us. I spend time during the better weather in the front. Sometimes I'm sweeping the sidewalk. I get in conversations with people just as a conversation.
mm-hmm.
How you doing? How's it going? And sometimes people want to talk. A lot of this has come out of the need for the understanding that we need a connection.
Yeah, yeah,
We don't know how to say we need a connection, but it exists, and it exists so that when we do make that connection with another human being and just talk about the things they want to talk about, you know, then there on that level, we're beginning a process. We are looking at the idea or the, well, is there a block association? I think on our the block that the church is on, there is no block association. And if one will exist, we want to be a part of it. Again, we have to make that move.
mm-hmm.
We have to say, we're a part of you. How can we help?
Love it.
So then when you're seeing, oh, well, that's what they do. No, there's no such thing as they.
Right, it's
What
us.
are we doing?
Right.
How
Mm,
can we be a part of this? How can we come up with some ideas to help you in your daily walk? So these kinds of things have to come out of, like I said, just simple conversations that don't rely on the people coming to church in order to have the conversation.
exactly, exactly. It's totally different as you and I were speaking about. before we went into the official interview. COVID, the pandemic has put the way we do church on Front Street, right? It's not as we grew up in the church, or even as some people who are still in the church or new to the church would remember. But what I hear you saying is that you see that the survival of our communities takes a level of accountability that has not always been there, not only from the community members who are outside of the church, but also the church extending itself into the greater community to let them know, look, we're on this block, we're a part of you. An investment, in other words, right? An investment into the community.
Yes, if we're not invested in the community, then the church begins to look like a social club.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if it begins to look like a social club, that everyone will get in their cars and it becomes a commuter church, well, what about the people who live there after dark?
Right. Exactly.
So if the people who are there after dark have no idea that you're their partner, then you have failed.
Yes. Yes.
So whatever we can do to add to the flavor of the community, to lessen some of the load, is what we have to look into. We've applied for grants and, we've had ideas and, trying to get monies because, like we discussed earlier, money is hard to come by in this economy. If you look at it, what is going to cost you for a gallon of orange juice later on, you'll know. And
Right.
so again, it's hard. So some of the things you want to do, you have to then become even more innovative.
Right.
Before the pandemic hit, we had arranged to get a mobile van to come out to do blood pressures and all those kinds of things. And then
Mm-hmm.
COVID just stopped that in its tracks. But again, the effort is there to try to make sure that the people from the community have an access that they may not have had before.
Right. Right. And I think that your approach to this is very refreshing in that it gives me hope. So I believe that when viewers begin to view this interview, for those who are skeptical of the church, they may have a renewed interest in at least Glover Memorial Baptist Church under your leadership. And that's really one of the reasons why I chose you. I've been wanting to have a sit down with you and pick your brain apart from the news of the day that we often respond to. But I knew that if I were able to sit down with you, I would not be disappointed because you are indeed a Black man living in history. You are making history. You have seen much in your life, as you just referred to, but you are also paving a way for us to be a strong community as we continue to work out our soul salvation for the days that we still remain here. So I am indebted to you for allowing me to sit down with you and share, or have you share with me and the Sable Network TV family. Pastor, could you leave us with some words of hope for the future as we begin to wrap up?
Especially during Black History Month, I'm reminded of my grandfather, who was the first Black deputy sheriff in his county in South Carolina.
Mm.
And there was an article written about him and how he became that first person, letting me know that there was a struggle and we'll all struggle from time to time. But the fact that he was the first also lets me know he's not the last. And so some of the things that we're going through, there has to be a bridge. Somebody is going to be at the front of the bridge, somebody's going to be at the rear of the bridge. But the important piece is that we cross the bridge,
Mm. That we
that
cross.
we are going to be able to make it, that Our ideas don't have to be so large and grandiose, but they can be small and incremental, but they allow us to move along. It's wonderful just to tear down the wall, break through, and we're in. Mm-hmm. However, if we have to take our time and tap at the wall until it begins to fall down, then let's get to tapping.
Let's get to tapping.
Let's move in the way that we can, not just rely on the big moment.
Right, right.
So it's like Lotto. Well, it's $60 million today.
Wow.
But if you got $2, you are still ahead of the game because you could have zero.
Exactly. But that's the way we need to think, Pastor. That's the way we need to think. And I appreciate you sharing your grandfather,
my grandfather.
Your grandfather's history with us. What is his name so that we can be good students and look it up?
George Calhoun.
Okay, everybody, look, this is Black History Month, and which is why Pastor shared that with us. We're going to look up the first deputy sheriff in
Barnwell County, South Carolina.
I heard him, right? George Calhoun. Pastor, thank you so much. Reverend Dr. Donald Odom has been the subject of amplifying voices, presenting and introducing. God bless you all. Thank you so much, Pastor. We'll see you with the next Black History Month moment.
Thank you. God bless you all.